Hello everyone, today I will be going over OP-09 Luffy. I think that this is one of, if not the most underrated leader in the entirety of the OP-09 metagame, and I think that given the right build and the correct pilot, this deck can succeed and do very, very well. With that being said, today I'll be going over the list that me and my friend Jude came up with that I used to win a flagship last weekend. I'll then get into some of the card choices, why I'm playing certain cards, why I'm not playing others, and then finally I'll teach you guys the curve of the deck and how to go about piloting it. First card is 4 of the Law Searchers. Then we have 4 of the 3-cost Zoros. Next is 4 of the Frankie blockers, 2 of the Vanilla Robin blockers, and 3 Sabo blockers. Next is 3 Zoroduro, followed by 3 6-cost Brooks. We have 4 Morias, and 3 Luffy Taro. For our 2Ks, we have 4 Marias, 4 Sanjis, and 4 Usohachi. For the events, 4 Giants, and 4 Lightnings. Now I'll go over the whole deck, explain some of the card choices, and talk about the theory of the list. First card, obviously the leader. Dawn times 1, all of your characters get +1 cost. I cannot put into words how amazing of a static effect this is to have on a leader. It helps in the black matchup, it helps against Dofi, helps against some yellow decks, some green decks. Just an overall amazing effect to have on a leader. Then the second one, once per turn, when 2 or more Dawn are returned to your Dawn deck, you can set one as rested and one as active. Obviously, the deck is built around this, so we have a lot of cards that interact with this, but it acts as an enabler for the whole deck and opens up a lot of lines that wouldn't be possible otherwise. Next, we have the 1-cost Law Searcher. It's a searcher. There's not much to say. Helps you find your missing pieces. That's about it. Good card. Next up is another pretty self-explanatory card for any Luffy list. This is the 3-cost Zoro. On play, you may return 1 or more Dawn cards from your field to your Dawn deck, and set one as active. If you choose to return 2 Dawn cards, this will interact with your leader, and you will get 1 rested and 2 active from Zoro and the leader's effect. And you can also use it to not interact with the leader by just playing him, returning 1, and then getting 1 back as active. This means that he is basically always either a 2-cost 5k body or a 1-cost 5k body that will ramp you 1 Dawn. So he is super essential to putting you back on the 8 Dawn curve so that you can play Moria out early, and is the main card that you'll be mulliganing for. Next up is the 4-cost Frankie blocker. He is very good in the mid game, but he is more essential to find as a Moria piece. He is your main Moria target. On play, Dawn -2, discard 1 card from your hand and draw 2 cards. He is a hand filter. If you play him from Moria, he is a +1. And yeah, he's a nice body that is also a blocker. Very essential to find mid game so that you can set yourself up for the Moria plays. Sometimes you'll play him out as a vanilla with lightning, but also can just play him out on curve, use him and interact with leader to filter your hand if needed. Overall, very good card, helps with the consistency of the deck, helps you find your Moria pieces, helps you do everything. Very good card. Next up is the 2-cost Vanilla Robin blocker. The reason I chose this blocker over others is that it can be called off Moria for the 2-cost slot, which means that you could do plays like Standing Robin, Rested Zorojuro, or Standing Robin, Rested Frankie, which is very good because you get a blocker on the field and you also get another body that is harder for them to swing into, as opposed to doing something like playing Standing Frankie and Rested Beppo, something like that. The Beppo's always going to get traded by a searcher. It opens up a lot of new lines of play, which I really value in a deck, and is also very nice because you can fit it into a lot of odd curves. Next is the 5-cost Sabo blocker. He's mainly here to be a hand filter, but the KO immunity comes up a lot in the black matchup and can also help into some other removal decks. Him being a 5/6 body is also really great because on your 6th on turn, you can use him in combination with Lightning, because Lightning will interact with your leader effect and Sabo won't. So very strong play to get a body on the field, remove one of their bodies, and still be able to filter your hand. Overall, yeah, just a great card. Helps you boost the consistency of the deck. Helps you discard the pieces that you want for Moria next turn. So, for example, you could play Lightning, Sabo, discard your Frankies, discard your Laws, whatever you want in the discard to play with Moria for the next turn. Can help you set it up in can help you set it up and not be forced to use those cards as counter, which can get kind of awkward sometimes. Next up is one of my favorite cards in the deck, the 4/6 Zorduro Searcher. One of the main reasons why he's so good is that he doesn't interact with leader, which I know sounds weird, but it's amazing because if you ramp on the first turn with the other Zoro, you'll be on 6 Dawn, and you can play Zoro to search for a lightning. Then you could also play lightning afterwards, still have 1 up to attach to leader and swing. Very, very good card. Obviously, helps you find your other pieces that you need for Moria the following turn. Could help you find Frankie, could help you find Robin, can help you find literally anything you need. It is super good, boosts the consistency, and is just an amazing body to have on the field, and can be a very, very strong tempo play if you play him out with the Lightning. Next up is 6 cost Brook. This is a card that we went back and forth on a lot. Originally, it was the 7 cost Sanji, and then it went back to the Brook. Ultimately, we landed on Brook because while this card can be a little bit slow, because we're ramping to 6, we can drop him on curve, and a 6/7 body is very hard for a lot of decks to deal with. So more often than not, he'll end up sticking on the board, and when he does stick on the board, his impact is unmatched. When attacking, return 1 or more Dawn, so you can choose to have him interact with your leader or choose not to have him interact with your leader, and give 2 characters minus 2k power. This is amazing because you could essentially just guarantee swing over any unit they play, as well as this combos with lightning. So you swing with Brook, give something minus 2k, and now your lightnings are hitting 8ks. So you can hit Jack, you can hit Rayleigh, you can hit the 7 cost Whitebeard. So many important cards you will hit because of this Brook. You won't be playing it very often, but when you do, the impact is really, really amazing. Next up, the best card in the whole game, Moria. On play a 4 cost or lower and a 2 cost or lower. One has to be rested. This deck does such a great job of utilizing Moria because your early game has so much hand filter with Frankie and Sabos. You can search the targets that you need with Zorojuro and Law. You have a lot of ways to set up your Morias and also a lot of ways to dig for your Morias, which is the main weakness that a lot of Moria decks have is that they can't search for it. So this deck will just dig for it. There's a lot of combinations. Like I said, you can play Active Frankie, Rested Law, go +1. You could play Active Robin, Rested Zorojuro, search for something. There's a bunch of amazing options that Moria gives you in this deck, and yeah, it is the best card in the whole deck. Next up is a card that a lot of people don't run. It is Luffy Taro. So Luffy Taro in this deck basically acts as a 5th, 6th, and 7th copy of Moria. On top of that, it is also searchable, so it adds consistency if you really need to find him with a Zoro or you need to find him with a Law Searcher. He adds another layer to the deck that was previously not there in our prior builds. And he's really amazing because he also has just inherently a lot of targets in the deck. You can play the 3 cost Zoro, you can play Zoro, you can play Frankie. If you need to, you could even play the 2 cost Robin blocker. Very good card, adds a lot of consistency, which I value a lot. And yeah, he's great. Next up, we have Maria. She is a 2k counter and also a backup Zoro. So on our 3 Dom turn, we have our Zoro, which is what we ideally want, but Maria is also there and can help put you back on the 8 Dom curve for Moria, because with her leader ability, you will go back down to match the opponent, and the first time you do this, you will proc leader effect and ramp 1, essentially. So on top of being 2k counter, she is also just, yeah, a very good utility card in the deck. Next is the 2K Sanji counter. His effect comes up somewhat often, just for the fact that there's a lot of cards in this deck that interact with your Dawn deck in a way where you can choose how many you want to return. So you can quite easily fulfill Sanji's condition just by being down 2 Dawn, which is very, very nice. Playing him for 3 is great, and he could also be a Luffy Taro target if you do set him up like that, which is pretty funny. But mainly, he's just there to be a searchable 2k counter off of Law and Zorjiro. Next up is 2k counter Usohachi. This card is most of the time a 2k counter, but also an amazing card to go for game. On play, if you have 8 or more Dawn, you can rest one of your opponent's 5 cost or less characters. So you can rest almost any blocker in the game. Yeah, just amazing to go for game. Amazing to just keep them in your hand, hoard them until you're ready to go for lethal. Great card and searchable. Next up is Giant. This card is insanely broken, not only for the fact that its effect is incredible, you get a 4K counter that also filters your hand, but for the fact that they always have to respect it. So even if you don't have it, you can either bank off getting it off your life, or you can just bluff and they have to kind of respect it. And yeah, it's completely broken. And finally, we have Gum Gum Lightning. This is probably the second best card in the deck, unironically. Down -2, KO one of your opponent's power 6K or less characters. It's an incredible tempo play because it interacts with your leader. So for essentially what's one cost, you're popping a 6K power or less character, which if you do this on curve, you're killing basically everything they play. Um, and late game, you can use it to kill blockers. You can use it to pop anything that's troublesome. Combo this with Brook, you can pop their top end. It's so, so good and such an amazing card. It has to be 4. I will never go down on this card. It has to be a 4 of. It's so amazing. Next, I will be going into some cards that did not make the cut. The first one is Gear 5 Luffy. Now, this card is really, really good and was in our list until probably the final version. The main problem with it is that it's pretty counterintuitive to the deck. You want to go wide with this deck, you want to have Moria and Taro on the field. So, having to bot deck your entire field to play it is a very big downside. So, more times than not, it kind of just sat in your hand until you're ready to go for game. But even then, we have a lot of cards that assist with going for game that being Lightning, Usohachi, and a bunch of other cards. So I think that this deck has no reason to play it really, due to the fact that we don't lack ways of going for game or pushing for lethal. So that is the reason we decided not to play it. Next up, we have 2K Counter Beppo. He's okay. He's nice because you can search him off of Law, but because this list also includes Zorojuro, he is not searchable off him. So having less targets for Zorojuro and in turn less consistency was not something that was very appealing to us. So in the end, we decided to cut Beppo. Another reason is because our Morias never felt that much worse without him. It was never like, oh my god, I don't have Beppo. This is such a bad Moria. Like, as long as we have Frankie, everything was pretty fine. So he overall felt unnecessary in the deck, but not the worst card. Next up is the 4-cost Nami blocker. Now, this might be controversial. Next up is the 4-cost Nami blocker. Now, this might be a little bit controversial, but I swear this card is bait. I understand why a lot of people do want to play her because she does, in some sense, act as a 5th and 6th and so on copy of Frankie. But from playtesting, she just doesn't do enough. Her effect isn't on until your late game already, so she doesn't help you cycle for Morias. She doesn't help you set up for your Morias. She is just a vanilla blocker with a really bad stat line until the late game, and she just never feels great to drop on curve. I would almost always rather have a Zorojuro or a Sabo. Yeah, I don't see what other people are seeing in this card. And we also have the Robin blocker, which in my opinion, has a lot more utility and fits into your odd curves. You could play her off of Moria for some better plays. Yeah, I just think that this card doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the deck. So in the end, we chose to cut her. Next is Bon. Bon is fine. It's just like a personal preference, I think. Instead of Bon, we chose to run Zoro Zero, so the slot had quite tough competition. But in the end, what made us not want to play Bon is how easily tradable he is. On the plus side for him, he can be a good Moria target, and he can be great into a lot of decks that drop a lot of boss characters. But overall, his early game was quite weak, and he didn't feel necessary since we have enough ramp with Zoro and Black Maria. But he is a fine card. Yeah, he's inoffensive. Okay card. Next up is the 7-cost Sanji. The main reason why 7-cost Sanji didn't make the cut is that he just feels pretty underwhelming, to be honest. He does rest at 6 cost, which is nice, but like I said, we do have a lot of ways to deal with blockers already in Lightning and Usohachi, so that effect never came up that often, and he's not that great of a body. He's 7/7, so he's pretty sticky, but at that point, we came to the conclusion that we would rather always play a Luffy Taro, or we would rather drop Brook on curve, because both of those bodies have a lot more impact on the game overall than Sanji ever will. So he's okay, but overall just pretty underwhelming. Next up is 9-drop Luffy. He's aight. I don't really have much to say about him. He's a pretty decent card, but when compared with our top end, which is Moria, the recursion isn't there, and I feel like there's a lot more that you can do on your 9 down turn. But overall, he's fine. If you want to play him, you could play him. It's an okay card. Now, Kaido to me is a lot like Luffy, just in a different sense. The downsides that he has compared to Luffy is that he is not searchable, but he does have some pluses, which is he guaranteed clears a body and probably clears another one by swinging. But overall, I think the leader is too fragile to play cards like Kaido. You can't leave Giant up reliably because if you do leave one up, then you can use it, but you will go back to 6 or 7 Dawn the following turn, which feels very, very weak. And considering the current meta, uh, Kaido is not that great because decks like Dofi will just answer it with Red Rock. So yeah, I think that going wide is way, way better than going tall in the current metagame, but it's not a bad card by any means. If the meta shifts, then I could definitely see Kaido making a return to the deck, but for now, I don't think he's needed. So moving on into a little bit of the game plan, we're going to be talking about what you want to mulligan and what you will be looking for in your opening hand. So priority number one is Black Maria, Zoro, and Law. Zoro being number one priority. Law obviously will help you find the Zoro, and then Maria is kind of your backup for Zoro. So these are the key cards, mainly because assuming you go first, Zoro and Maria will help put you back on the Moria curve. And if you go second, then Zoro and Maria will also put you back onto a Taro curve for turn 3, which is very, very strong. Now, assuming that you have at least one of those previously mentioned pieces in your hand, second priority will go to Frankie and Moria. Moria because he isn't searchable, and Frankie because he is a key piece for Moria and will help you filter your hand to get to Moria, and is also just a very important card to have in your discard. So, yeah. And finally, these cards are all kind of tied. It really depends on the matchup, but these are your mid-game cards. So Zoro, Sabo, and Lightning. Yeah, depending on the matchup, which card you want and which card will take priority will change. But in a general sense, these are your third priority cards. So assume you have Zoro, assume you have Frankie. These cards are just bonuses and great to have in your starting hand because they help so much with the mid game. So next up, we're going to talk about the curve of the deck. This example is assuming that you're going first, but if you're going second, you can easily adjust. The curve of the deck is very similar regardless of turn order. So first turn, you want to play Law, search for your missing pieces, your Zoros. Turn 2, you want to play your Zoro Ramp. So you play him, you will have 2 active Dawn, so you can either attach both the leader, swing 7, you could play Robin, you could play a Law, attach 1 to leader, swing 6. A lot of options. Next up on your 6th on turn, assuming that you were able to get the ramp off with Zora Maria, Frankie is one good option. Not your best, but one fairly good play because you can use him to block and put himself in trash for Moria. You could use him to cycle your cards for a Moria. Just an overall great card. Another great play is Zorojiro plus Lightning. Now, one of the reasons why this is such a good play is because Zorojiro can search Lightning, and you could pop a 6 cost while also, or pop a 6k power unit while also putting out a 6k body, which is great. And then in a similar vein, Sabo plus Lightning accomplishes a very similar thing, but you need this combo in your hand. You can't search out the Lightning or filter for the Lightning in Sabo's case, because on 6 on, you would need to Lightning first and then Sabo. Finally, shoutouts to Brook. Yeah, just a very impactful and strong character to drop on curve if you can. Hard for a lot of decks to deal with. And on your 8 on curve, this turn is pretty set. You always want to Moria. Depending on what you have in trash, your Moria could be good or your Moria could be pretty weak. But at the end of the day, a Moria is a Moria. If you do a combination like this, you'll always get a +1. which is fantastic. And then your backup for Moria, or if you are on 7 on, then you can do Luffy Taro into a bunch of targets. Half the deck is a target for Luffy Taro. You can play Frankie, you can play Zoro Zero, you can play the regular Zoro, you could even play Robin Blocker. There is a whole bunch that you could use. And yeah, just a very, very good card and helps with the game plan of flooding the board, controlling the board with lightning, and overall just being very, very proactive. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that I was able to shine a light on this leader. He is so much fun and I think very underrated in the current meta. Try out this build and let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or you can message me on Twitter. Other than that, this is my first video, so any feedback is greatly appreciated. And because this is my first time making a video, I do think that I wasn't as articulate as I could have been. So making a note or a tournament report for this leader is something that I'm very interested in. So let me know if that's something that you guys would like to read. But with that being said, thank you all so much again. Bye.